What is a soldier? A soldier is someone who is a warrior, a fighter. In some countries and civilizations, soldiers were bred and taught from a young age. Here in the United States, we have little programs like the ROTC, but our young men and women start around age 18. Over 40 years ago, thousands of men and women answered the call to our nation and went overseas to a country called Vietnam. The Vietnam War was considered a very political war, and over 50,000 men and women lost their lives. The ones who were fortunate to come back were ridiculed by their own countrymen. But before I go more into this film, let me introduce myself.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Sosa. My father, Rudy Sosa, was in the Vietnam War from 1966 to 1967.
As a young child, I attended Mike 3-1's first reunion in Washington, D.C. at 1993. I have always been interested in the guys who served alongside my father. In October 2008, another reunion was held in a very unconventional place.
Bright light city, gonna set my soul on fire. Viva Las Vegas! Viva Las Vegas! Viva, viva Las Vegas!
Yeah, it was a bit different holding a Marine reunion in Sin City, but the compilation of stories I received and the camaraderie that I saw was amazing. These are the men of Mike Company 3rd Battalion 1st Marines. Through their personal histories and experiences, may we find what really happened in Vietnam. All of these men that I had talked to had enlisted in the Marines and had not been drafted. They had put their lives on hold to serve their country, each one leaving behind a family and setting their eyes on boot camp.
During boot camp, it was a cultural shock.
Boot camp was a vigorous 12 weeks of training, but most of these men did it in 8 weeks before heading off to Vietnam.
Knew very little about Vietnam other than what was told to us through boot camp and ITT training. And
I was completely ignorant of the place and of war.
I had no idea that Vietnam even existed. I had no idea where it was on the map. I had no idea that we were over there. I had no conception of what the hell we were doing there.
I was a bit apprehensive not knowing where I would be stationed or who I would be stationed with.
I didn't know anything about Vietnam before I got there, and while I was there, I didn't know nothing about Vietnam.
Once you landed in Vietnam, what were your thoughts?
Oh boy.
Boy, it's hot.
When we landed in Vietnam, there was a lot of commotion in the airport at Da Nang. A lot of movement, some people leaving, some others coming. We landed in Da Nang during the daytime. A commercial airline took us over there.
It seemed kind of surreal to me because I landed in a Boeing 707 with, they called them stewardesses at the time. It's not politically correct now, but it just seems strange to have, 150 men on this Braniff Airlines, not flying to a vacation, but flying to a war zone.
The bush was sand fleas, and rain, and mosquitoes, and Vietnamese. The bush was really, it was tough living. And you had to have a formula in order to live in the bush.
Depending on where we were, down south around Da Nang, it was more of a psychological thing because of booby traps and, a few snipers every now and then, and ambush. Not much action. But then we went on a float phase. When we went up inside the DMZ, it was an altogether different war. We were fighting against a regular North Vietnamese Army, NVA, and they were rockets, mortars, and artillery. they were good with them. They had the same weapons we did.
We cannot pin something down to one time for the most part. One time we would be happy, and other times we would be sad, we would be lonely, we would be wet, we would be sick, we would be ill, both psychologically and physically many a times.
I had a lot of thoughts in the bush. In fact, especially at night, that was a time for thinking. You know, you're supposed to be always vigilant and always alert, but boy, I tell you, you know, you think about a lot of things. You think about your young life, you know, your family, people back home. Are you going to make it? You know, does anybody care? You know, you think about a lot of things.
And it was emotionally draining because of the heat and where the train we had to travel, and then all that emotional fear of being hit and fired upon. It was tough.
There was a lot of fear because my first day we took a couple of casualties, a couple wounded, and being new, being frightened, being unaware of the situation and not knowing what to do, you kind of followed the lead of everybody around you.
I also, you know, kind of, you know, there were times I really enjoyed being out in the sticks. You know, I didn't like the nights, you know. I used to joke the mosquitoes, you know, they would come on duty after the flies went off. The flies would be there, you know, until about 5 or 5:30. They'd leave you alone. And then about 6, the mosquitoes punched in. So you always had some critters that were bugging you. As Judy said, she wasn't in Kansas anymore. I knew I wasn't in the States anymore.
We ran a ambush outside of NSA Hospital in Da Nang, and I was being taught to walk point, and we were going down this little narrow trail, and the Vietnamese let me get by, my first fire team get by, and then they blew a claymore right in the middle of the squad. And when he did that, it took out the radio man, and it took out the machine gunner helper. And one of the guys that it took out came over with me on the ship, and we had just congratulated him because he had a baby boy. And I can't think of his name, but he took a piece of shrapnel through the chin, and it took out the top of his head. And I remember I cried like a baby. I cried like a baby.
It was dark, and we started walking, and we were humping out the bush. You know, I was carrying my pack, 7 mortar rounds, and as you're walking along, you know, illumination would open, light up there and start swinging down, and there's only one guy standing up, and that was me. Everybody else knew to get down, and all of a sudden they said to get down, you know. So then when you heard the noise, you knew to get down, that you were going to be lit up, you know, and you would have a nice silhouette. You'd be giving yourself away. And my first night on the patrol, we went, I don't remember the name of the place, but then I was told I was going to go out into the hole with a guy named Snooks. So I went, when Snooks come to wake me up, he gave me a little bit of soda and told me to get in the hole. And I said, well, what do I do? He says, if you see anything, throw a grenade. I said, then what happens? He says, don't worry. He said, everybody will be up.
My first patrol was probably, like I said, 3 to 4 days after I joined my company. And it was a day patrol going out to the Two Cow Bridge, out to the Calvet River. And they have I didn't know it at the time, but there was a sniper that was in the area that at the same time every day would fire off 1 or 2 rounds at us. Never hit anybody, but being a new guy, I didn't know that. So when the rounds went off, I was immediately on the deck and for all intentional purposes, getting as close to the ground as I could get, scared shitless.